Yo, 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 what up? We out here once again, Buff Missionary in these streets. Like, subscribe, and share. If this is your first time checking this out, we're going through the book Steps to Christ, and this is probably the fifth or sixth video on this. We started chapter 1 a while ago, so subscribe, go back and check those videos, and make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss the future episodes where we're going to continue going through this book line by line, paragraph by paragraph, and see if there's anything worth it for us. Here it is right here. It's called Peace Above the Storm, this version of it, but it's also known as, oh wait, this is In Search of Peace, different edition. But it is about finding peace because I believe that you can find peace in Jesus. And there are a lot of signs out there that we can use as evidence for this, despite what a lot of people might tell you. So anyway, we're going to jump right in and continue here. It says, God has bound our hearts to him by unnumbered tokens in heaven and in earth. There are so many things when we look up at the sky, when we see the stars, when you feel that difference of being out in nature, whether it's swimming in the ocean, like I was doing in Palau just a couple weeks ago. Man, a couple weeks ago, it's been too long already. I need to get back out there. But when you're sitting out in the quiet and you're in a hammock between the trees and you're listening to the wind just blowing through the leaves, when you see the connection that animals have with each other, when you see how mothers look after their children, the newborns, it's amazing. Anywhere that you look in nature, there are lessons here, and each one of them tells us a little bit of something about how God cares for us and how he's bound to us through that. Through the things of nature and the deepest and tenderest earthly ties that human hearts can know, he has sought to reveal himself to us. And this is what I'm trying to get at. We walk through nature and it's like we take it for granted. The things that we see, take the consistency of the seasons, for example. I'm up here in Michigan and it can get pretty cold for many of the months of the year. And yet the grass continues to come back. The trees always bloom again. There's this cycle of death and rebirth, and there's something beautiful about the fall when the leaves are falling off and when they're changing colors and when they're going through that experience. But we know that in time they'll come back again and they'll be reborn. God is trying to show us something through nature that we go and we only look at for its beauty. We're not making the connection, the deeper connection to why it's really here and what we should really be seeing from that. But here's the thing. These but imperfectly represent his love. Imperfectly. So there's a lot of great things that we can see through nature. There's a lot of awesome connections, but we know that there's this thing out there that's tainted the experience, right? Sin, destruction, decay, death. All of these were never part of the plan. So there's a little bit of a taint on nature for as great as we can feel when we have those experiences, when we're being a part of nature and walking through nature and experiencing it. There's an imperfect representation of God and his love there. And we have to be aware of that. We have to be aware of that. Though all these evidences have been given, the enemy of good blinded the minds of men and women so that they looked upon God with fear. Now, let me ask you this. In your spiritual experience, or even if you're not spiritual at all, have you ever felt like you had a fear of God or a fear of the unknown? Or if there was a God, you thought that he operated by fear, so you wanted nothing to do with him? That's not a coincidence. It's actually very natural, but we have to, again, be aware that there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. God has his image, and something sought to distort that image. If we look back in creation, when we see that everything was created, God said that it was good. Nature reflected goodness, and God said that he is good. Let all my goodness pass before you, right? And yet something came to taint that image. Something came to mess up the goodness that God had created through creation and is represented through nature down to our time. There's something off about that. And we have to give credit where credit is due. There was an enemy who has done this. as another Bible parable says. We end up looking upon God with fear. I know in my own experience, that's something that I struggle with sometimes. It's just to give you a little bit of background, I always felt like, the whole lightning bolt's going to come out of the sky if you do something wrong. It's hilarious that a lot of people have this picture of who God is, and we never stop to think, where did that come from? We just hear that, and it makes sense to us because we're sinners and we feel like we can't do anything right or we can't do anything good. So it makes sense. We also put ourselves down in the sense like, well, if I can't do anything good anyway, I deserve to be treated bad for the bad things that I have done. And we assume because God is this idea of perfect that he can't stand it and that he wants to immediately eradicate anything that goes contrary to what he wants in the world. But if you really step back from that thought and think about it, you know that's not true. Why? Because we're still here. The earth is still here. And even in the instances where something like this may have happened in the Bible, you take Noah and the flood, you take the experience of the Israelites with Joshua going into the land of Canaan and the conquest, and what a lot of people would call a type of genocide going on there. You have to dig a little bit deeper and you have to realize how much bigger the story is. And again, you have to remember that there's something else at play. You have to give credit where credit is due. We look at those stories in the Bible and we see it only through the perspective of Noah, and we never think, what was it like living for one of these other people there who didn't make it onto the ark? What was it like for the people in their culture who were living in the land of Canaan with no thought or any idea of the Israelites who were in bondage in Egypt? What was their experience with God? We don't know. We only see their experience when it intersects with that of the Israelite people, but we make a whole lot of assumptions just based on that little interaction. Take a practical note from this right here, right now. How many different people do you come across in your experience? And we treat them as if that one interaction with them is the only thing we ever need to know about them. We label them, we identify them, we discount them, we embarrass them, we do whatever we do to them based on that one interaction without having any idea where they come from, what their culture is, what their experience is, what their background is, what their family situation is like, their own personal struggles. We have no idea, but we're so quick to judge the entirety of who that person is by that one instance. Is that fair? Is that right? I don't think so. We all do it. I've done it too. But we have to be willing to look deeper. We have to be willing to stop and say, is there something else going on here? Is there something more going on here before we're so quick to judge? It's interesting. People thought of God as severe and unforgiving. And I think the irony here is that we end up putting the things, our attributes, the way that we feel about ourselves compared to people who we view as being above us, we're putting those attributes as if God has those attributes because we have a very limited understanding of who God is. So when I think of people who are better than me and who don't accept me and they reject me because of my imperfections, I project that onto God as well. When I think of the people who harm me that I don't want to have anything to do with my circle, or the people who look different than me and act different than me and believe different than me, and I don't want them to be a part of my circle, I project that attitude onto God and start to think that he thinks the same way towards me and everyone else around me too. And that's not right, because that's not who he is. We have to be willing to look a little bit deeper. We have to be willing to go beneath the surface if we're really going to understand how all of these things work together and what God is really like. But we have a great starting point in nature. Though imperfect, it's a great starting point. Satan led men to conceive of God as a being whose chief attribute is stern justice. That justice is the only thing that matters. How good you are at doing the right thing. And if you do the wrong thing, oh man, you're going to get zapped. How many of us have had these ideas of who God is and we never think of where it actually came from? Again, a lot of us think this way, and it's not a coincidence that we think this way, but we need to be aware of why we think this way. You know, sometimes we view our own thoughts just on a surface level too and never dig deeper to really understand why we think the way that we do. And we just accept it for what it is without ever digging any deeper. Satan pictured the Creator as a being who is watching with jealous eye to discern the errors and mistakes of men, just waiting that he may visit judgments upon them. That's Satan's idea. It's not who God is. It was to remove this dark shadow by revealing to the world the infinite love of God that Jesus came to live among men. Here's the thing. If we look at this idea that we have of God, stern, always waiting to condemn you, just harping on every single one of your mistakes, you can't do anything right, you're no good, you're not perfect, so I don't want anything to do with you. If that's the idea that we have of God, and Jesus is the Son of God, we have a problem. Jesus came for two reasons. One, and this is the easy one that everyone always thinks of when you're asked the question, why did Jesus come to this earth? It's always to save us from our sins. Great. That's all good. But that's one part of the issue. One part of the solution, I should say. But here's the thing. If Jesus is coming to save us from sin, so that we could be reunited with the Father, and we have this unforgiving, highly judgmental, very critical view of God, why would we want to be saved by Jesus? We wouldn't want that. If Jesus is going to save us to be with someone who's just going to be so critical towards us and judgmental towards us, why would we want that? We wouldn't. So Jesus came to do two things. Yes, he came to save us, and that's great. But almost to a more important degree, in terms of appreciating the salvation aspect, he came to show us who the Father really is. Because we wouldn't want the salvation unless we knew how loving God really was. That's why Jesus came. Two reasons. Never forget this. Yes, to save us. But to show us God's love and the reason why we should want to be saved, why we should want to accept that gift of salvation so freely given. A lot of things have been distorted since the beginning of time. In nature, our views of God and our projections of how he feels on our daily life and how that impacts everything that we do and the way that we interact with other people. Jesus came to correct that. Jesus came to give us the perfect view, a recalibration of what it is that God really is and who he really is, and to show you that there may be some justice there, but that's not all it is. There's a lot of love in there too. And when the two of those things work together, we get a very different picture of God. And that's a picture that we can be excited about. That's a picture that we can invest in. That's a picture that we're willing to live for and to accept the gift of salvation to be around. So we'll stop here for today. But I want to thank you for tuning in. Once again, it's Buff Missionary. And I encourage you, as you go through your day and you go through your experience, think about that difference. Think about the times where we're quick to judge things on the surface and not look any deeper, and challenge yourself to look deeper beneath the surface and figure out what's really going on here. Give credit where credit is due. Make sure that you know that there's someone and something that messed up the perfect creation that God made, messed up this perfect image of God that he made. And there's something that we can do to experience salvation and to appreciate salvation. But it's going to take understanding that God really loves us. So we'll see you in the next one. Like, subscribe, share, comment your thoughts down below. And until then, we'll see you. All right? Peace.